Hello,
Hi.
and welcome to another episode of David's Divergent Discussions. I'm your host, David Gray Hammond, and tonight I have Tanya Adkin here with me. We were going to have Katie Monday as well, but due to personal circumstances, they've had to pull out. So, shame we don't have them here, but still going to have a really good chat. So we're going to talk about neurodivergent parenting.
We
And
are.
it's going to be good. I'm sure there will be lots to learn. Tanya happens to know just about everything when I ask her questions about parenting stuff. So I think uh, I think we're in for a really good episode. Just a quick announcement for anyone watching this who's interested in my writing. My chapbook, A Treatise on Chaos, will be available for free on select Amazon platforms from tomorrow until the 27th of this month. So that's from the 23rd of June to the 27th of June. So do check it out if you're into neuroqueering and listening to me ramble for 2,000 words. Anyway, back to the point. We're going to get into it. Neurodivergent parenting. We'll start with brief audio descriptions. So I am a 30-something-year-old male with a beard, thick rim, purpley greyish glasses, a lip ring, an ear tunnel, a shaved head. I'm wearing a black vest top, sat in a blue room next to the notorious bookcase.
Don't do that.
I do it just to wind Tanya off. I just knock it. And that's pretty much it. Oh, there's also a really cool poster of Middle Earth in the background. Just throw that in there. Anyway, Tanya.
My name is Tanya Adkin. I am a 30-something-year-old, light-skinned, female presenting person with light blonde shoulder-length hair and transparent rimmed glasses. I have a nose ring and a septum piercing. I'm wearing a creamy coloured t-shirt and I am in a room with some really funky diamond wallpaper and a blue wall.
Fantastic. And I can already see some regulars in the comments saying hello. I see Bobby there saying hey, hey. And Ortballs there saying hiya as well. So good to see we got some people in the comments. Anyway, neurodivergent parenting. This is I guess the first question people are going to ask is why do this? Like, what's the difference? Like, why do we need to cover neurodivergent parenting particularly, and not just parenting?
Because it's different, isn't it? It's very different. I mean, if we're neurodivergent parents, then there's a high possibility that we'll be parenting neurodivergent children.
Yeah.
And the way that we interact with the world and each other is entirely different. And we have monotropism, double empathy, sensory differences, and all those other wonderful things that mean we communicate and interact with the world in a very different way. So why would we not need different parenting? And let's be honest, do traditional parenting styles necessarily work for neurotypical children? Who knows?
I think that's a very valid question. But for people listening who might not have heard some of these terms, would you mind just sort of covering what monotropism and double empathy are?
Yeah, sure. So monotropism is kind of a side quest autistic specialism of mine. Everything comes back down to monotropism. So I would describe monotropism as the engine that kind of runs autistic brains. It's the way in which our attention works. So neurotypical attention, we all have a limited amount of attentional resources, regardless of neurotype. And polytropic or non-monotropic attentional resources is more of a broad spectrum, like a flashlight. So it can cover on a surface level a lot of different attention streams, so it can flip attention quite easily. Monotropic people tend to deep dive their attention, so that means they hold fewer attention tunnels because they're using more attentional resources in each area. So that would probably explain why we're prone to things like burnout, etc., and monotropic split. But it also accounts for lots of things like autistic inertia, for example. So if we're really deep into our attention's really deep into something, to actually move that attention out and refocus on it can actually be quite traumatizing for an autistic person. It taxes our cognitive resources, and just existing in the world requires us to split our monotropic attention. And if there are more demands to split our attention, the level of detail that we pay to each different thing doesn't change. It just stretches our attentional resources past the amount that we've got. So yeah, I hope that was a pretty rounded up explanation of monotropism.
That was a pretty good explanation of monotropism. You're always the right person to ask those.
I know, but I haven't actually got a script for it, because I think, because I like thinking pictures.
Yeah.
I just see everything in pictures and in moving kind of parts, if you like. So when I try and put these things in words, I'm just, how do you explain that? So yeah, you usually do the wording for me, don't you?
Yeah. And if you want, I'll cover double empathy if that helps.
Yeah, you can do double empathy.
So double empathy, the premise of double empathy is to do with why autistic people are viewed as having a deficit in communication. Now, the thing is when neurotypicals communicate with other neurotypicals, because they have a sort of shared culture and linguistic approach, let's say, you have good communication. And in the same way, when you have autistic to autistic communication, tends to go relatively all right. Again, we have that shared culture, that shared use of language. However, when you get neurotypical to autistic communication, you can have this breakdown because we have different cultural experiences. We use language differently. We approach. We communicate differently.
Monotropically.
We actually do. But the problem is that because autistic people are a minority group and the world is not particularly kind to minority groups, we are labeled as having a deficit in communication because there is this sort of neuronormative standard that says we should all communicate in one particular way, when actually that's not true at all. And, sometimes it's necessary for people to communicate in a style more comfortable for us, but some people don't like that. I just wanted to highlight this. Someone has asked, Tanya, could you give us a couple of lines on what monotropic split is, please?
Yes, so monotropic split is something that I came up with in my picture head that I thought everybody knew existed, but it turns out doesn't. So monotropic split for me is, as an autistic monotropic person, when you are trying to manage lots of different competing attention tunnels, and you are exceeding your attentional resources or your energy reserves. So it can cause things like burnout, shutdown, overload. And if you are sustainably living in that kind of state where you're exceeding your attentional resources by trying to pull out and refocus, etc., it can lead to kind of long-term burnout problems as well. So for me, monotropic split is trying to exist in a polytropic world when your brain is just not made that way. I mean, the easiest example would be, as we're talking about parenting, would be autistic children in a school. So you are managing, flitting, listening to instructions from the teacher, somebody moving behind you in the class. We are flitting from one subject to the next every hour. We are moving around. We are managing all the different sensory stuff. So yeah, and like Ortborg has just said, parenting really does stretch your attentional resources because it is a constant attention stream that you are plugged into those young people.
And this is really the key part, isn't it, with monotropic split, is that, we might be simultaneously focused on two things, but we can't sort of divide our attention equally, so our brain tries to focus on them both with the same intensity.
Yeah, so actually it's that inertia. So you are always intensely focused on things. So you're going in and pulling out and going in and pulling out and trying to flip your attention in the same way that a polytropic person would. But because you've got so much more energy into it, pulling it out, I suppose it's a name for a very specific type of cognitive or attentional trauma, really. that autistic people experience.
And we could spend forever going over keywords here, but for the record, polytropic people, for all intents and purposes here, we're talking about people who can perform neurotypicality.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a quick shout out because someone I haven't seen in a while is in the comments. So, hi, Northern Autie. Pleased to see you. And anyway, so this really, it comes back to the point that Bobby made in the comments. We don't parent like NTs.
Because we're not NTs.
We're not neurotypical. So, we don't suddenly switch on and become a neurotypical person when we put our parent hat on, like we're just as neurodivergent after having children as we were before.
Yeah, and I think that can be another cause of like monotropic split, can't it really? Like, the kind of stereotypical what parenting should be that we take quite literally in quite detail, and we're trying to spread ourselves that thin to be the perfect parent when actually the perfect parent doesn't actually exist. So I think, Kieran Rose, our wonderful friend, bless him, refers to it as parallel parenting. And it's about, so the overview, I think, of what we're going to talk about is how we kind of parent differently, but how we parent in a way that caters to the needs of our children and also ourselves, because the thing is, we've got to put our own gas mask on first, haven't we? So yeah, Marsha just asked a question, actually.
Yeah, I was just about to highlight this, actually. So Marsha is asking, can you mask your parenting to be NT?
So this is a really interesting question, because the thing is, we frequently joke, don't we, that there's only one more dangerous thing than a neurotypical white man is a heavily masked neurodivergent white man that doesn't actually realize he's neurodivergent. So yeah, I think you can, but actually sustainably, performing neurotypicality in any sense, whether it is parenting, whether it is at work, if you are exceeding those attentional resources and you are staying in monotropic split, it's going to lead to really negative outcomes in terms of attentional resource and energy deficit and burnout, which is not good for anyone, really.
Yeah, and it's really important to note here that camouflaging, masking, whatever you want to call it, it's that projection of acceptability. And when we are constantly trying to project an acceptable identity to the world, it is yet another drain on those attentional resources
that we don't have.
Yeah. So, if you're already sort of in monotropic split because you're working and parenting, and then you're trying to camouflage your autistic traits on top of it, you're in hot water.
Yeah, and everybody's got a different kind of attentional tolerance as well, for how they can perform neurotypicality. I'm sure that some autistic people manage okay with it, but it's what else you've got on your plate. Because let's think about parenting, because everybody talks about parenting it's this one thing, but actually it's not. It doesn't. So when we think about parenting, we're thinking about we are our children's PA. We are managing appointments. If our children are neurodivergent, we may be fighting with schools. We may be dealing with diagnostic pathways, corrupt local authorities, EHCP systems. We may be, and then there's just the normal parenting part of, needing to co-regulate, needing to educate, ensuring that the house is all livable and done, and the packed lunches are done, and the favorite foods are in, and there is so much that you need to be plugged into. I think the Western idea of neurotypical parenting is not really very compatible with monotropic brains.
I agree. And Northern Autie just chimed in with a very good question. How does a monotropic split in parenting contribute to our understanding of parent-child dynamics and the development of attachment patterns in children?
Haha, I knew it to try and throw a key curveball. So interestingly, 50% of autistic people do demonstrate or meet criteria for what would be considered attachment difficulties. And I think it's a kind of chicken and egg question. because what you're potentially looking for when you're looking at things that create attachment issues is trauma, and you find me an untraumatized autistic. So it's chicken and egg, really.
We've written about this, the fact that untraumatized autistic people are basically unicorns.
Yeah. So until you find me an untraumatized autistic person, nobody's realistically going to be able to answer that question. And actually, it's also then you've got to understand, like, attachment. Actually, the whole concept of attachment is based on neuronormativity. So what does attachment look like for autistic people? We parallel play. You know, our communication styles are completely different. So the way in which we would judge attachment would be really the way that a parent and child interact. But actually, let's take that away from neuronormativity. What are we looking at? Are we looking at, I mean, is this why neurodivergent parents are often accused of having attachment issues, for example, which may not be the case? And this is why we've developed tools to try and unpick what is attachment and what is autism, you know, and sometimes you can't unpick the two. So yeah.
Yeah, and I certainly think it's you know, it's important to note that that I've lost my train of thought, and we'll move on.
Yeah, David just ADHD'd it then.
Yeah, ADHD the hell out of that. It was a really good point as well.
Yeah.
No, it's right. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it's just not coming
You're
back.
going to remember it in about 10 minutes, and we're going to be talking about something completely different.
Yeah. Well, it is David's divergent discussion.
Yeah, because they naturally diverge.
Yeah. But we've had another question. There's going to be lots of questions today, I can tell. What do we do when social services come creeping, parent blaming, and they just don't get it? I think, Tanya, you could probably do a whole webinar on this.
Well, I think I have done a whole webinar on it for Autistic Parents UK before, because this is kind of my professional area, if you like.
And institutionalized parent carer blame is a real thing. There are some very serious consequences to it. And I know we've written about it together. So what would you advise people when they're in this situation?
Right. Hold my beer. You're about to get a monologue. So pretty much what Marsha said, mask. That's it. It's not safe. The thing is, I'd love to sit here and go, no, it's all fluffy, and these laws are there to protect us and to provide, you know, what we should be legally entitled to, etc., etc. The real kind of situation is, you know, people will guard resources first and foremost, you know, and also, so everything is kind of centered around resource guarding. So whether that be services at school, whether that be diagnostic services, whatever. We also have an awful lot of professionals that aren't up to date with what we would use as standard kind of foundational autism knowledge. So the things like monotropism and double empathy and sensory needs, which we spoke about, you know, so many high up professionals don't know about this stuff. It's just not common knowledge or used in practice. Even if they do know, they don't know how to translate that into practice. And, you know, disabled people always get the blame. It's a Western hangover of the medical model of disability, isn't it? It centers disability as something that is centered within the person or the family. You know, it's a hangover from the medical model, and we need to move more towards a social model kind of way. But it's not something that's done overnight. And I think that there's always going to be people that kind of blame. And also when we look at services that are peddling institutionalized parent blame, it's a very, very bloody convenient way to very quickly make people go away and save them money and resources.
Absolutely is. And it did actually remind me what I was thinking of. You said it had happened. So because, you know, one of the things that services will often use against autistic parents is dysregulation, especially emotional dysregulation.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I was thinking about was when Northern Autie asked this question, how does monotropic split contribute to parenting dynamics?
We're probably going to get into that. Yeah.
Monotropic split really affects your ability to regulate your emotions. And if your co-regulation is off in a family, all hell can break loose.
Yeah, and this comes back into disability and hidden disabilities, because I think there's kind of an overarching view in services that if you are academically able, therefore you must be fine, you must be high functioning, or you must be mentally ill if you're not coping. But actually, you know, if I didn't have the use of my legs and I needed something to help me get upstairs to parent my children, we would have a stair lift fitted. You know, so it, but if, for example, I was struggling to split my cognitive resources over working and studying and doing the housework and parenting, then it would be me, and I would be abusive and I would be mentally unstable. And what services tend to do, what I see a lot of, because I work with a fabulous team of independent social workers, so big plug for Mary Cartledge, Rachel Gavin, Kathy Long, if you're watching, hi. What we, when we tend to get bought in, what we're looking at is co-dysregulation, because parents have existed in this state of monotropic split for so long and they can't stop, that it has a real effect on their mental health, and then they get to create a self-fulfilling prophecy of safeguarding. So that's real kind of problem that feeds into the kind of narrative of institutionalized parent blame, when actually all we probably need is another set of eyes in the house, or somebody to take over the cleaning, or, you know, a little bit of a break so we can live more monotropically.
And this is the thing that always gets me is, you know, that very neuronormative idea that we should all be self-sufficient and do things on our own. But there is truth to that saying that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah. And
You
this is
know,
why, yeah, Western parenting is not compatible with autistic neurology. It's really not.
no, because there is this attitude that we shouldn't need support, shouldn't need help. But actually, we do, and that's okay.
But
You
it's
know?
not just us that need support and help, because
No.
what is the difference between you and I as disabled parents that work, and, you know, we are working class, we earn a normal amount of money, but actually me, I get somebody in because of my disability and my needs. I have a carer that does the cleaning, washing, housework, make sure the bill's paid, all that stuff, which allows me to effectively parent my children, study, work. If I was a richer person that had somebody in my house doing those things, it would be perfectly acceptable. But because I'm a working class disabled person, I must be incapable. And it's just classism, ableism, and it's those attitudes, isn't it?
Yeah, and we can't miss the nuance that when you exist on other intersections, you know, of race, gender, queerness, the chances that you're going to run foul of professionals increase exponentially.
Yeah, 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 it does.
And yeah, you know, I constantly think about the fact that, and I think this applies to all parents, not just neurodivergent parents. You know, you're at the hospital, they give you the baby, they go, here's the baby, congratulations, on you go. And I'm like, okay,
It's a bit
now
like
what?
getting your autism diagnosis, isn't
Yeah,
it? Only
yeah,
problem, this one's alive.
yeah. Except this one is literally alive, and it's my job to keep them that way. Um, no one even told me that men could get postnatal depression. Do you know how I found out? I got postnatal depression.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing for men until it happened to me.
Mm.
And then a professional went, "Oh yeah, that can
I
happen." I was
think
like,
as
"Why
well,
didn't you tell me?"
I remember having my eldest son, and for some reason, I'd bought the idea that, you know, motherhood will just come naturally. You'll just instinctively know what to do. And I can remember having this baby, and I got this baby and I was in shock because I just hadn't give birth, which is a whole terrifying experience in its own right. It's sensory hell. There's nothing glamorous about that at all. And then all of a sudden, everybody left the bloody room. And it's almost like I was waiting for this heavens to open and some light shine down, and they just, fitted me with all this knowledge that's supposed to instinctively come, like the Matrix or God or something, and it just never happened. I was like, oh shit, it was a lie. Did I take that literally?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me was the realization that in the grand scheme of how long the Earth's been around, I'm really not much older than my baby.
Yeah.
Like, what? Why do you keep calling me a responsible adult? Up until this point, I have been the most irresponsible person alive.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in front of you on the parenting game because your little one's quite young. I tell you what, though, not instinctively knowing how to parent has actually been a massive benefit to my parenting. Huge.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going in. I mean, obviously there's like safety, how to change bums, nappies, all that stuff, and etc., etc. But actually I wasn't going in with any preconceived ideas of how things should be. I just let it happen, and routines, they just create themselves, and we just found our flow. And it's not like I haven't made mistakes as a parent. I absolutely have. But actually we relaxed into it. There was no parenting. I can remember somebody giving me a parenting book, and I was like, oh my God, I'm supposed to do all this, but we just, I didn't know how to do it, but I knew how not to do it, and it worked.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make, because we sort of reparent ourselves a bit.
That is really difficult.
I mean, I love my mom. She did a fantastic job, but that doesn't mean there's not bits that I would do differently. So I have to go back through my life and think, okay, this is a similar situation to what I'm experiencing now. How was it handled then? How would it be handled now? What would I have liked to have happened when I was that age?
And I think as well, there's something else to be said as well, because a lot of us felt really kind of misunderstood and didn't necessarily have the best childhood. And that wasn't because of our parents per se. That was because of our needs. That was because we felt like broken neurotypicals. And I think for parents that are late diagnosed as well, I mean, I discovered my kind of neurodivergent autistic identity off the back of my eldest son starting school and struggling, and then, doing the only thing that an undiagnosed neurodivergent parent can do, and sitting there for like 24 hours straight, not eating, drinking, peeing, and reading all the things and learning all the laws, and then suddenly the penny drops. So I think when that happens, and that's how your discovery happens, not only are you dealing with your child that is in crisis, and because actually, let's be honest, they only really get identified when they're in crisis, because the diagnostic criteria is based on traumatized autistic people, but you're then reparenting yourself from a neurodivergent perspective and reprocessing everything that had happened to you and how it's not your fault. And that's quite traumatic as well as then realizing that generationally this has gone back, so there's generational trauma to unpick, and it's a big job. It's a big job.
And I'm glad you mentioned school trauma, because we did actually have this question come through from Claire Anna saying, what one thing would you have changed about your school experience to make it less traumatic? I think this is really relevant, because school is where a lot of kids get diagnosed. Subsequently, it's when your kid is at school getting diagnosed that you tend to notice yourself you're neurodivergent, if it's not already been noticed. So there's a lot going on when your child goes to school and they're neurodivergent. So I guess we could think more broadly, not just what would we change about our school experience, but what in the school environment could be changed.
Well, I don't think schools work in the way that we do them in the UK anyway for any child. And I think that is really obvious with what's going through inquiries at the minute when we're looking at attendance and things like that, and the state of mental health, our children's mental health, and a lot of that. And I know that they're blaming COVID, etc., but actually, no, it's not bloody COVID. It's the schooling system. It doesn't work. But I think what would have I have changed really about schooling? I would have. I mean, when I look back, at me in school, if you like. I went to 7 different schools. I was permanently excluded at the age of 14 and never went to another one. But it was so bloody obvious that I was PDA. So bloody obvious. Or at least autistic or an ADHD. I mean, I think back, how does somebody miss that? But actually, it's still being missed. So actually, if somebody would have identified me, at least then I would have had the opportunity to go and find out about my own needs so that I could then learn what they were and how to better interact with my own environment and manage my own environment, you know?
Yeah, and I know for me personally, like, I wasn't excluded or anything, but I remember, infant school, so we're talking sort of year 1, year 2, which is what, like 6, 7 years old. School reports that said David must stop acting like a dog at the back of class. Apparently, I used to sit in class and bark like a dog. Then I went to junior school and I was getting bullied. And they were going, well, he's not like the other boys, and that's why he's getting bullied. Then I got to secondary school and they went, well, he does 5 dance classes a week, plays the trumpet and hates football. And they were like, it's really his own fault he's getting bullied. And, no one at any point went, well, we've noticed he's completely different to all the other students here. We're just not going to do anything about it, and despite my mother trying to get me a diagnosis, I didn't get a diagnosis till I was in my mid to late 20s.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's kind of like, I work with an awful lot of professionals and statutory, well, I do, much to my own disgust. And what I get is there is no multi-agency working. Nobody actually wants to take responsibilities for things that are outside of their remit. Nobody wants to push. Nobody wants to advocate for somebody. Everybody wants to throw in referrals to here or referrals to here. Nobody actually wants to. I mean, I had it right in a child in need meeting for a young person that's really experienced some really tough mental health challenges and traumas in school. And it's a real bad time for them at the minute. And the social worker was just sat there and going, well, yeah, that's an education problem. And I've emailed them. Like, no, like, where is the duty of care that, if you are working with young people and you are being paid to work with young people, let's bring it back to holistically. Where's the accountability?
Yeah.
Because what would have happened? I mean, if I was young today, would I have been identified autistic? Probably not. I'd probably be stuck on a 4-year waiting list, and they'd probably say, oh, no, she can't be autistic because she makes eye contact and she's too socially able, and we live in a county that doesn't recognize PDA. That's what would happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of bureaucracy. And Northern Autie is really dropping some good comments, and I'm going to highlight this one. The onus is always on the ones that are different. I think this feeds into what you're saying. If your child is at school and they are different from the other children, the school doesn't go, how can we adapt the environment to suit them? The school goes, how can we force them to fit in with our system? And then we wonder why so many kids, like, I remember I was out of school for 3 months. They called me a school refuser. They threatened my mum with court. What it actually was severe autistic burnout. Really severe autistic burnout. Would not wrap their head around the fact that my additional needs should be supported. And actually, they weren't even additional. I'd been through a lot of crap.
I was a school refuser from probably year 6, year 7. We used to call it persistent truanter then. I can't ever remember being asked why I did not go to school. I can remember being chastised for my mental health because I was a self-harmer back then as well. Obviously, I now know what I was experiencing was a lot of sensory trauma and communication trauma, and trauma, basically, whatever form of trauma that autistic people experience. But I can't ever remember anybody scratching their head and thinking, oh, I wonder why this person doesn't want to go to school. It was just constantly report card, pressure, 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 pressure. And they wonder why it has the opposite effect. I mean, pressure is kryptonite for an autistic person because it creates monotropic split.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the sort of trauma that can occur to children what options do neurodivergent parents have when they've got a severely traumatized neurodivergent child? What can they do? Where do they turn? Are there approaches that can
it
help?
depends in what context. Like, you know, if it's school trauma, I mean, Louise is here. Hi, Louise from Define Fine. Really, so Louise is a neurodivergent parent herself and went through the whole like FII parent blaming stuff, and she has some really good guides and a group about you know, what would have been labeled school refusal fines, difficulties with send, that sort of stuff. Hi, Louise. You can drop. Do you want to drop a link for Define Fine, and David can put it on the thingy screen, because we're going in several places at the minute. But yeah, so we can do things like that. Hi, Claire. Claire's another neurodivergent parent. Sorry, ADHD. I can see the comments, but if I couldn't see the comments, I'm panicking because I'd be like, what are people saying? Yeah, so what can we do? It's difficult. It's really difficult, because the problem is, as a neurodivergent parent, when you are already, I mean, I think you assume, I made the assumption when my eldest started struggling in school, that we have all these wonderful laws and policies, and, you know, we're a really good country to live in. And surely we're going to be nice to disabled people. No. Laws have loopholes.
And there's the link for Define Fine parent peer support.
Highly recommended. But and it's really difficult, because if you're a neurodivergent parent and you are parenting neurodivergent children that are experiencing trauma, you are then even more exhausted because of the level of co-regulation that you have to do with a child that cannot regulate themselves. But then you have to have a full-on legal brawl with the local authority to get where you need to get. So everything is spoons heavy. And this is where we come back into creating that self-fulfilling prophecy of safeguarding, which social care, education, you know. So even if they start out with, oh yeah, it's definitely mum, she's definitely making it up, she's definitely mentally ill, right? Eventually they will put on so much pressure and so much fight and make it so difficult that that will then become a self-fulfilling prophecy via burnout. But all is not lost. There are legal things that you can do, you know, so things like EHCPs. There are some really good, you know, there's some really good peer support groups around, like Louise's, which we just shared. We've got things like IPSI, which is free resources. If you are in receipt of benefits, you should be able to get legal aid for EHCPs. There is a lovely little bit of law, I think, that Louise will be able to back me up on this, that basically tells us that mental health and physical health have legal parity. So it's not illegal for your child to technically be out of school. So it's really technical and difficult, but it literally applies the pressure. Because the thing is, especially if you're a neurodivergent mother specifically, and this obviously is true for any neurodivergent parent, but specifically for people who have been socialized as female, we tend to fawn. We tend to assume that we are always wrong. We tend to take things literally. So when we get to the point that we are asking for help, we are already beyond a crisis point, but we then have to step it up and fight even more.
And Geeta is asking if we can recommend autistic and neurodivergent professionals who can go into schools to give guidance and training.
So it depends.
And whilst we're at it, if you've got any books you want to recommend by professionals, Tanya, go ahead and recommend them.
Professional book? Oh God, no! You've put me on the spot. I can't think. I wasn't thinking about books. What books?
Anyway. Well, I mean, off the top of my head, I've got one here: the therapeutic 87 therapeutic parenting.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Parenting. Yeah, so we'll go into parenting strategies soon. So yeah, lots. It depends in what sense. So strategies. Fundamentally, I have a major issue with strategies. One size fits all strategies do not work. You cannot replace neurodivergent competence. Because once we have that secure understanding of how autistic or neurodivergent neurology works, you don't need a strategy. So it's that fundamental kind of understanding. And actually, those are the things that should be taught in schools. So again, like Ruth has just posted. So yeah, Jodie Smitten, me, I work in a lot of schools. Who else? Kieran Rose does. Bobby Ellman, she does the little ones. She's in the chat. They are in the chat. Yeah, Ruth's posting a lot. So there's, you know, Libby Hill, if you want salt. I think fundamentally, though, if you had to pick one thing, well, maybe two things to start off in terms of understanding autistic experience, it would be teach them about monotropism and teach them about sensory processing if you can't teach them anything else.
Absolutely. And I think now would probably be a good time to sort of move into, you know, we've talked about the legalities, you know, what can people do when faced with professionals. But what about when you're in the home? And, you know, I know on my part, you know, I've had parenting experiences where it's like you don't know how to manage a traumatized child's expression of what's going on
Oh, so you
inside
mean
them.
things like managing meltdown and managing, and managing.
Yes, so I know that, for example, one book, as which I've already mentioned, that you've always recommended to me is The A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting. So that has some really useful nuggets in it. I wondered if you had any useful nuggets for people who perhaps have a child who's traumatized.
Oh God, you're pushing me into a controversial corner here, David. I know what you're doing. So the standard recommendation for when you have a traumatized child or a burned out child is to remove demands, low demand, low arousal parenting. Your parenting has to be dynamic. It has to be dynamic to the child, because actually when you lower demands or take away demands from some children, that can create a demand in itself through choice paralysis and overwhelm. It has to be unique to the child. And I think, again, what I would go back to is learning everything that you can about autistic experience. Read all of the things and then decide what is relevant, because it's not just about your child's needs, it's also about your needs and how those interact and the needs with everybody else in the home as well. So again, therapeutic parenting, I swear by, I think it's brilliant. Do I follow it verbatim? Absolutely not. Do you think about your child? Do you take things out of that is useful for you? The PACE model. So that's playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. So Ortball, you know, Mona Delahook, Ross Green. So Ross Green is the children do well if they can. But none of these things need to be followed verbatim. They're there for ideas. They're there for what works for you and your child. And I think when we look at parenting, we say, oh, it needs to be low demand, no demand. It depends where you're starting from. Because compared to neurotypical child rearing, the way that neurodivergent people raise children is already low demand. So if we're telling autistic people to do low demand, we end up in no demand, which can end up in co-dysregulation. So it's about where that line is for your family and what works. And then the issue is as well is it has to be dynamic. So you have to know when to take demands off, when to put demands on. Because if you just keep stripping back demands every single time there is dysregulation, what happens is you get to the point where nobody can tolerate demands and in comes control, because what's happened is you've raised the anxiety by creating choice paralysis and too much control, which can be overwhelming. So it's very, very unique to the young person. And I realize that's probably no help. I would love to be able to sit here and just read you a strategy off from some book and go and buy this book and this is how you should parent. You know, I always argue that autistic and otherwise neurodivergent people are more diverse than polytropic people.
And I think you knew I was going to guide the conversation here, because I said to you before, I really wanted to get into the fact there is no one size fits all.
None.
You know,
The
the
only
same
thing that
way, the same way
Amy
there's no
Thompson.
one size fits all in a school or in a professional service. There is no one size fits all for any child, least of all neurodivergent
Yeah,
children.
and that's where you need to aim for competence, and that's where you need to be understanding the autistic theory, and you need to be understanding. So fundamentally, right, and every single training that I do, I always, if you could take one thing away from the training, it would be learn about monotropism. And I think Fergus, they wrote a really good piece for the, was it British Psychological Society or something, called Monotropism and Me. I think, and maybe it's the way that my autistic brain works, but once you understand how that engine works, everything else that is attached to autistic experience is just parts that are created by that fundamental monotropic neurology. So yeah, I'd go for that.
Absolutely. And of course, a lot of the concepts that Tanya and I have been discussing this evening, we've written about a lot of them in our Creating Autistic Suffering
Well, you've
series.
written, I've talked at you while you've been writing.
We have co-authored.
Co-authored.
You can find the Creating Autistic Suffering series on emergentdivergence.com. And yeah, I think we've got like 8 or 9 articles in that series now, maybe more. It's been viewed a lot. It's very popular.
Was it like 25,000 people? Was it? I think you just added it up and you was like, oh yeah, that's been viewed this many times. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, the whole series has had like 25,000 views. But anyway, Creating Autistic Suffering, we literally talk about the reasons for negative outcomes in autistic people's lives. And because we're talking about those things, a lot of it covers things like parent blame, fabricated induced illness, accusations, autistic trauma. We get into monotropism, various forms of burnout, psychosis. A lot of the things that people could possibly want to know about. And Bobby has very kindly put the link up to my website there, emergentdivergence.com. So
I mean, we could do an entire podcast just on one form of autistic trauma and still not gotten to the bottom of it. So please do have a read.
Yeah, but certainly, I think one of the most important things to remember when you are parenting a neurodivergent child is that you're probably neurodivergent yourself.
You are neurodivergent yourself. Come on, let's not go.
Also, I think it was you that said this to me, Tanya. If you're getting it right 70% of the time, you're getting it right more often than most people.
Yeah, and as somebody who assesses parents, remember, bad parents don't worry that they are not good parents.
Yeah, in the same way that bad people don't worry that they're bad people, And we're not saying that bad parents are bad people. Let's not get too controversial. But, if you are worried that you're a bad parent, the chances are that you're actually a very good parent who is exhausted.
Yeah. And co-regulation. So the biggest takeaway, I think, for neurodivergent parenting is co-regulation and co-dysregulation.
Yeah.
Watch your own energy levels and regulation in the same way that you would watch your child's. Because very, very quickly, when we're under a lot of stress and experiencing monotropic split, we lose our interoception, we lose our regulation, and we end up living in meerkat manner, where we're all on edge and we're all up. So I would say, a bit like, if you're therapeutically parenting 70% of the time, you're doing really well. If you are effectively, calmly co-regulating 50% of the time, it is better than co-dysregulating 100% of the time. And that's the biggest kicker. That's the biggest takeaway, because, I work a lot with institutionalized parent care or blame. I work a lot in social care. I work a lot in child protection, child in need, that sort of stuff, fabricated and induced illness. And I would say one of the biggest contributors to these misconceptions that autistic people are child abusers is probably a misunderstanding of services creating co-dysregulation.
It's like you've said, they literally create self-fulfilling prophecies in a lot of cases. But I know from my own perspective, I do a lot of mental health advocacy. I'm involved with people who are quite deep in the mental health system. And even there, with like autistic adults who are under mental health services, the parent carer blame is still there, because they'll be going, so how did your parents traumatize you? And they will not believe the autistic person when they go, it wasn't my parents. It was literally everyone else.
So we're work-wise, we're looking at we're looking at the frameworks that I can't say too much about it, that social care use for assessing disabled children, which is fundamentally pushing them down a safeguarding route. And we were looking at kind of how would we adapt that to avoid that actual thing. And the thing is, right, and this is the issue, in social care, we've got something for children called the Common Assessment Framework. Now, the Common Assessment Framework, which is part of something called, which is a bit of a Bible, called the Working Together to Safeguard Children document from 2018, is a little triangle. If you whack it into Google, see the triangle? It's child safeguarding and promoting welfare, and it's got 3 different sides with 3 different areas that you have to consider. All of those areas are actually focused within the home, within the family. There is no context for the different kind of welfare and safeguarding issues that disabled people may face, or parents of disabled children, or disabled parents of disabled children. So, when there's an organization that are looking at challenging this kind of framework and changing this framework, but actually, again, it comes down to the competence of the assessor. You cannot replace competence. Now, when we look in terms of gang crime, for example, and I realize I'm off on a tangent, but I will bring it back, it makes sense. But when we look at things like child exploitation, which I do a bit of work in, and county lines and gang crime, because, us autistics, we get abused across the board. So there's not really any area that we don't touch between us. There was a creation of something called contextual safeguarding, which basically shifted the context from risks within the home to risks out in the community, and the different kind of contextual safeguarding that kind of setup would need. They haven't done that for disabled children, because actually, specifically autistic children, I would say that schools and services and people out in the community are 100 times more of a risk to our safeguarding and our welfare and our well-being than anything really within the home, and it's missing that kind of context. They haven't got, it's a very fixed black and white view, and that also feeds institutionalized parent carer blame, but it's entrenched.
But I really want to hammer home that thing about, competency amongst professionals.
Yeah, you cannot.
We're talking about quite specific.
People are trying with books and with changing frameworks and changing policies and changing laws and changing the forms in which we're filled out and the questions that we ask, etc., but you absolutely cannot replace competence.
No, and I know that you and I have co-authored articles on my website about this, like neurodivergent competency, basically cultural competency in the cultural experiences of neurodivergent people.
And I think we should be viewing it that way as well, because autistic people have culture.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up criminal exploitation, actually, because when I was a young person, I was a victim of criminal exploitation. And had the professionals in my life have known anything about being autistic, about disability, about the various intersections I existed upon, my life could have turned out very differently. Now, of course, for me, it all worked out. I've taken the negative experiences I've had and I do things like this. But there are a lot of autistic kids, and we're talking about our children who aren't, or the autistic community's children as a whole are not necessarily lucky to have competent professionals in their lives who can look out
and it's
within the context of dangers outside of the family unit.
Yeah, and it's really sad. So I'd say that, outside of the autistic community, when I have to work in the real world, I'm kind of referred to as a complex autism specialist. Now, how much that makes me cringe.
Yeah.
But in comparison to the level of understanding and expertise that is available high up in these services, I'm blooming Einstein, and that's worrying, you know, and that not even in a big-headed way. The knowledge is there, it's available, but it's really worrying, actually. You know, when we see like a really sad case and there's or something like that, I can think of maybe less than 10 professionals that I would trust to deal with something that was considered complex, which isn't complex. I just think complex is another word for you don't know what you're doing. And it's really worrying.
Absolutely. I'm aware we've kind of gone off of the parenting topic a little bit
back
now.
to parenting.
But this is all relevant because, you know, as I said earlier on in this episode, parenting is not an individual role. It's not a job you're supposed to do on your own. And the professionals that exist are supposed to support you in that. And yet, so many don't. And we need professionals to upskill themselves to a point that they can offer meaningful support to neurodivergent parents of neurodivergent kids. Because so often neurodivergent kids are left out in the cold purely because a professional doesn't know what to do. And there's only so much we can do as a parent to mitigate that.
What is my favourite saying about CAMHS?
I think the words you used specifically was CAMHS kills kids.
It does. Completely. You know, because they don't know what they're doing. So actually, if your child is having a mental health crisis, the first thing I tell parents is the last thing you bloody want to do is send them to CAMHS. Not unless you want to make it 20,000 times worse. Just tick the box and hope the referral's 5 years away and you've sorted it by then.
Yeah, not to mention that even if you do get a referral to CAMHS, you're probably anyway.
Yeah. Thank God. But people do not know what to do with autistic people. And actually, so here's the thing about CAMHS. And again, this is going to seem like a pretty controversial opinion, but it's actually not. CAMHS ultimately is there to treat what would be classified as mental illness, right? 9 times out of 10, what creates mental illness in autistic children is environmental. CAMHS can't change the environment. So what do you want them to provide? It's not the right service.
And certainly, you know, it does all of this together when you take into account, you know, the lack of professional accountability, the lack of skills amongst those surrounding the family unit. You know, being a neurodivergent parent fundamentally can be, or at least feel, like a very lonely experience. Even if there are 2 of you doing it together, you know, you can feel quite isolated because not only now are you dealing with the fact that you're a neurodivergent person who probably doesn't get accepted well in wider society, now you are a family unit that is being isolated in the same way.
Yeah.
And Bobby just shared Luke Bidd's golden equation: autism plus environment equals outcome.
100% of the time. If ever a neurodivergent, a monotropic person, so that's ADHD as well as autistic, is experiencing some kind of dysregulation. Hi, Rachel. Sorry, distracted. But, you know, if a neurodivergent person is ever experiencing some kind of dysregulation, the first place that you should go is the environment. And the environment doesn't just mean like the sensory environment, the physical environment. It means the attitudes that they're surrounded by. It means the policies that they're subjected to, the services that they're not accessing.
The relationships between people.
Yeah, relationships between people, relational safety. It could be the attitudes of the ableist kind of environments that they're growing up in. You know, it's internalized ableism is such a big thing for children, and it's so sad. So it always fundamentally goes to the environment first, and CAMHS can't fix that environment. And this is the issue that we've got, because if we pull back and look at it, what can CAMHS do? They can provide talking therapies. They can provide medication sometimes. Well, great. You're going to medicate your kids, stick a plaster on a stab wound because it's the environment. So all that's going to serve as is a spoons extender. to traumatize them more.
I really think it's important to note here that, you know, we're told, you know, autism plus environment equals outcome. Okay, it's good to know that golden equation, but also you have to understand that environments aren't homogenous. We don't live in one single environment per planet. You know, planet Earth contains an infinite number of environments with, as you have pointed out yourself, Tanya, an infinite possible number of interactions
between a neurodivergent person and their environment. That's why.
And so, as a parent, when we are parenting our neurodivergent children, we have to be aware that we could adjust one environment to make it comfortable. There's probably 99 other environments that are still traumatizing them.
Yeah, or co-dysregulation, or, you know. And I think it's just about being curiosity. So it comes back to pace, doesn't it? Playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. That's what you need to be a good parent, as well as ensuring that your kids' basic care needs are met, obviously. But, you know, those things. And I think letting go of the shoulda, woulda, couldas and how to parent. And if you do get in hot water for any reason, I would absolutely say rely on neurodivergent professionals or neurodivergent people. If you need to know anything about autism, you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be the adult autistic community. And yes, we do communicate differently. And yes, we are kind of harsh sometimes. But if you're willing to listen, the knowledge that is there to be gained is huge.
Absolutely. And, you know, I really want people to take home this message as well, which is that, you know, there is a lot of really crap parts out there about being a neurodivergent parent, but it doesn't have to take away from having a happy and loving family life. You know, as long as you're not doing any harm, do what you can to show your child how much you love them, and they'll give the same back. You know, as neurodivergent people tend to reflect the energy that they're provided with. You know, so I really think, you know,
don't
enjoy the little things.
Yeah, let your foot off the gas. So we live life in the slower lane, and learning to live autistically, I don't believe that we can unmask and turn into this authentic person. I don't believe in that at all. I think that we adapt to our environments, and what we need to do is understand our own needs so we can create environments that are less taxing on our resources. So learn to live autistically, drop it down into a lower gear, parallel parent. So everything, you know, everybody's like, oh, natural consequences. No. Logical consequences. Low demand language. No. Communicate in a way that encourages interoception. It may look like low demand language, but actually what you're then doing is fighting that age-old traumatic battle that closes down interoception and self-advocacy. So it's just, competence. Parent with competence.
Absolutely. And we're going to wrap up in a minute, but I just thought I'd share this. Si's managed to turn PACE into something very ADHD themed. So PACE now stands for procrastination and coffee enthusiasts.
That some days that does sum up my parenting, I'm not going to lie.
I mean, that sums up my life. Like the last 30 odd years have been procrastination and coffee enthusiasm, probably starting from far too young an age.
Never stop learning either. Never stop learning. Follow what's coming out of academia and all that stuff. You know, there's so much discovery happening within autistic experience at the minute.
And for everything we've discussed tonight, 20 years from now, people are probably going to be recommending something wildly different, because as time goes on, we learn more.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to learn one sort of approach and stick with it forever. Like, adapt as time goes on.
Who is it that said, once we know more, we do better? You work with what you've got at the time, and then as you carry on, it adapts and it changes. So
and this is the thing. It's another reason why, you know, having a single size fits all approach doesn't work, because children change over the years.
I know. I mean, I've got 2 PDAs, but their profiles within that PDA profile are very different, and they need very different parenting. you know?
Yeah.
Oh, there needs to be a book. There needs to be a book, David.
Oh, someone's. Oh, yeah. I don't. I think
You're
it's
gonna
all right
trigger
to say this.
me.
There is discussion about a book, but that is as far as we've got.
But there will be an autistic burnout masterclass coming in the next few months. So keep your ears.
Somewhere around the beginning of August, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, around August time. It will be basically a really long bloody lecture. So bring your notebooks. But yeah.
And that'll be, well, Tanya's really taking the lead on that one. I'm just there to look pretty.
He does the writing. I'm not gonna lie. I hate writing.
I have a fluent skill in translating Tanya into.
You do.
To be fair, it's translating Tanya into David, so I wouldn't really call it English because
No.
we've got Tanya who is dyslexic and David who is hyperlexic.
And somewhere in the middle, it creates this really kind of elaborate, visually kind of way of writing things.
But yeah, keep an eye out. There's good things coming, fantastic things coming. But yeah, we should probably wrap up. And to wrap up, I'm just going to highlight that Northern Auti has provided another version of PACE, which is Pizza and Cookie Expedition, which is where I think I might go after this.
Pizza, though? Have you seen the cookie dough pizzas that you can get?
Yes, I have. I've had one. They're very good.
I don't think I'd manage a whole one.
No, they're terrible for you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been nice to actually be back on lives. I haven't done them for so long. Maybe we should do more.
Yeah, I think we probably should. Well, I'm always open to doing episodes of this. So if you think of episodes for this.
That bookcase, David, just wobbled.
What, this?
Oh, God. It's seriously going to go over and do you an injury at some point.
To be fair, several of the books have fallen off of it today and I've had to put them back on.
Can we just, no more nails it to the wall?
We could, but I like living with a little jeopardy in my life.
I think you just like winding me up with it, don't you? But yeah, so hopefully we will come back and do more parenting stuff, or maybe more burnout stuff, monotropic stuff, whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what you guys would like to hear about. You just have to let me know. Let us know.
Yeah, don't be afraid to get in contact and tell me, podcast episodes you want to or articles you want to see written.
You know what I really want to do more of? I really want to do more stuff on the ADHD experience and that intersection. I don't think there's enough information of ADHD experience and how that looks differently.
And yet loads of us are both autistic and ADHD. And in fact, some research estimates up to 70% of us meet both sets of criteria.
That reminds me of Bobby's ADHD discovery journey. Can you remember? I'm sure they won't mind me sharing, but we have chats where we're all kind of keep in touch with each other and stuff. And actually, Bobby was waiting for their formal assessment for autism, and they were really kind of shocked. And then they posted in a group chat to us all that they were really bowled over that they were also identified as ADHD. And we were basically sat there they didn't know. How did they not know? So actually, we'd been friends for so many years at this point and done so many lives and worked together and all this stuff. But yeah. So what do you think, Rachel? ADHD, monotropism, burnout? I don't know. But yeah. So Bobby didn't realise they were ADHD. And if anybody knows Bobby or has seen Bobby deliver any talks, they would know very, very quickly that Bobby is ADHD. And we just assumed they knew.
We recognise our own. Anyway, before the inertia kicks in, it's time for us to wrap it up. But thank you so much for tuning into this episode of David's Divergent Discussions. It's been really good. The next episode I have scheduled at the moment is next week, I believe, Thursday. I think it's Thursday. I'll have to double check that at 7 p.m. And I've got Rachel Cullen coming on to talk about the autistic language hypothesis.
Yeah, we will definitely get something booked in. Oh, PDA, we could do PDA.
Yeah.
Well, I think PDA would probably be covered under ADHD anyway.
So yeah, get in contact with those episode ideas. Always keen to hear them. Remember to check out mine and Tanya's Creating Autistic Suffering series. And
don't ever
thanks
tell me
so
how
much.
many people have read that though, David. It gives me exposure anxiety. I hate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and listening. This has been David's Divergent Discussions, and I
Awkward
will
wave.
catch you on the next one.